Well, if we've learned anything from round 3, it's that Tasmania can never be counted out at home. Kendrick Davis will respond to criticism, and those far north Queensland Snakes, well, they're hissing to start their NBL 25 campaign. I'm Kelsey Brown, here to welcome you in for another The Panel, the official NBL SuperCoach show for you guys. As I said, Kelsey here, NBL rookie for the SuperCoach League. I'm starting out afresh, but that's why I want to welcome in our experts. We've got James Clements here, SuperCoach Wizard. James, how are you?
I'm great, thanks, Kels. Basically, I'm a hot dog on a hill. I'm ready to roll. It's like week 4. This is where the rubber hits the road, right? This is the awesomest part of the season. We know a little bit, but we don't know enough. Boydie, this is the best part of the season. You can still make some cash. I'm ready to rock. Let's go.
Boydie, welcoming you in as well. 1/3 of the basketball blokes, you know your stuff. I'm keen to hear your insights today. Welcome in. How did you go in round 3?
Thanks, Kelsey. Good to be back. Yeah, it went pretty well. A big climb in the rankings, and I think this is where the season gets interesting, like you said, James. So I'm looking forward to it, and there's lots of different ideas getting thrown around, so we'll talk about those today.
Well, I spoke earlier, I am the rookie, and I want to touch on those things for newbies maybe in the space. Can you give me some do's and don'ts, some really simple, basic fundamentals of what I can do, what I can't do, and give me some insight into that, JC?
Well, if you want to do, don't follow what I do. You know, don't do what Donnie don't, right? That's basically how I roll. No, I look at one of my favorite things every time going into a SuperCoach season is obviously trying out different lineups, trying to figure out what you like the most. Your vibes team, Boydie, I love a good vibes team.
Don't mind vibes.
But at the same time, you sort of got to look at this from a strategic point of view. You're like, how do you want to set up your season? Do you want to make cash to spend on the primos later? Do you want to go for points really early on? Do you want to like load up your team from the get-go and then just like start burning trades? And like that's kind of how I start each SuperCoach season. It doesn't matter the code. That's how it goes, right? And I think this year for NBL 25 has been fascinating because you have this weird mix of like cash cows that are kind of producing, but there's not quite enough. Whereas the primos, we've seen a lot of price rises when it comes to like the really high price players. So you can actually take some of your favorite players, ride them for a couple of weeks, hopefully bank some points, this sort of stuff, and then jump off, trade them to another one and keep sort of that moving. I think that's how my season sort of started and I'm pretty happy with it. But I mean, on top of that, Boydie, most of it's like strategy about who's playing twice a week and that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah, that's it. The schedule's the key thing, I guess, when you're starting out. And also, one of the big things we always say is, you know, don't disregard your bench. Other SuperCoach games, you know, you can have players on there that are scoring zeros, but you can't do that with NBL SuperCoach because you've got all of those 10 players scoring for you. I know the bench is only scoring you 50%. So you want them to doing something. Like if they're getting 10s, that's okay. They don't need to be getting 20s or 30s, but you certainly don't want zeros and you certainly don't want negatives. So that's the keys, I guess. Yeah,
well, I started pretty poorly, I'll say that. But then the last round, I made up about 5,000 teams in the league. That's so I'm pretty happy with that. Mm-hmm. I think I held on to Ian Clark a little bit too long. He started a bit slow, and then as soon as I traded him out, he popped off against Perth with that 25 points. So I've learnt some mistakes, but I want to get into the hots and nots of this week. So we start with Kendrick Davis. He comes in 86 points, 322,000. Jack White, I've had him since the start, which I've been pretty proud about, and he did come good last week, which I was happy about. He finished with 75, 315, 800. Milton Doyle, another one that I've had, so a pretty big one for me. I think I've kept on to, but he's done well, 67, 350,000 for him. Montrezl Harrell, you spoke about him a lot last week, JC. I bought him in as well, but he's in that hot list. And Christian Doolittle, I think, is the interesting one for me. They had 2 losses this week, and he still scored 60 points in SuperCoach. Boydie, what do you think?
Lots of rebounds. He does everything. He does the little things, and I think Pinder's out at least their game this week as well. So Doolittle might go okay. So if you've got him, you know, he might possibly be a hold where you might think he might be a trade out. Now they're on a couple of singles there. So Doyle's an interesting one. Obviously they're a single this round, but double next round. One of only 2 teams on a double next round with New Zealand, that is Tasmania, obviously.
Well, he was so good they named a hurricane after him.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yes,
like once they start calling Hurricane Jimmy, then I'm on to something, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, he's one, again, I'd be holding on to him if you got him still. So get him ready for that double next week.
And I had Kendrick Davis, like he was my first pick player at the start of this season. I'm just like, I'm all in with Kendrick. And I was literally aiming for these 2 weeks, rounds 3 and 4, because he's on the back-to-back doubles. And you saw him respond to the criticism of like, hey, let's just all just settle down. I'm pretty good. Check this out. Goes bang. And if you had him captain, like a couple of our favourites, you know, the biggest teams did this week, you are laughing. So He popped off, Jack went off, and Trez. I kind of half nailed that. It was okay. It wasn't great.
Trez was my boost this week.
Ooh.
So, and I didn't do it. I actually talked about it on our podcast. I wasn't going to go Trez because I was a bit worried about that job share with Humphreys, etc. And then when I saw that, because luckily I had the Thursday game, he was in that starting lineup. I was like, oh, this is the kind of sign I need. I'm using a boost. So I went with it, and I mean, it paid off. So.
Well, let's go to the other end of things. We've spoken about the hot, which is one of my favourite topics, but there's also the not. And there's a few players on this list that are a bit of a worry. So Deng Adel, first player of note to probably score a -3 for this round. Will Hickey for Illawarra, he was a 10. Bull Quoll, he finished with a 14. Lots of talk around Bull Quoll and entering into the Kings this year. Nathan Sobey, also a lot of chat around him to start this season. He finished with 16 and he's sitting at 290, 800. So that price is high for the delivery. And Cam Oliver, Jack Heveron's early pick for Sixth Man of the Year, he scored a 16 at 287, 400. What are your thoughts on the nots?
Well, I think there's two pretty concerning ones there, isn't there, Bordy? It's probably Hickey and it's Oliver, who are the two most owned of that list. The question sort of becomes, can you hold these guys? Can you ride this sort of little bit of a downturn? Hickey's probably going to be one of the most traded out players this week, I dare say, just with the Hawks on a bunch of singles at the moment. Whereas Cam Oliver, you can probably keep riding him because this is the key thing. When we talk about schedule, they have 5 games over the next 3 weeks, right? So it's like 2 this week, 1 next week, but then they have another double the week after. So it's how much you want to believe in Cam Oliver and that role, which that's going to be the biggest question. Like, do you believe? I don't know, Bordy, how do you feel about Cam Oliver?
Well, I traded him out after round 1, so maybe
not
go with
not
it.
well.
So, but in saying that, like I think that 16 was in that Brisbane game where it was kind of a little bit over. What was a lot over?
At half time it was over, right?
Yeah. So you know, you can kind of maybe give him a pass mark for that. If you've got him, I'm not sure you're trading him out. I think you're riding him for the double this week, even though that stacked Kings lineup, you know, it's hard for him to get those points, I think. Yeah, and Hickey, I mean, he's probably going to be a bench player for you. He was cheap to start off with, so most of the people that have got Hickey probably had him from the start, or at least brought him in for that first price appreciation. So I'd be holding Hickey. The other 3 guys I'd probably be getting out. If you've got him, Adele, Quoll and Sobey would be outs for me. They're all going to be bleeding cash.
Yeah, well, that's a reminder for the hot and the not. I want to move on to the people that are doing well. A shout out to some of the top performing teams of this week. We've got the Diz Jumpers and Trent there with 492. Now, he did well because he had Davis as captain and Rob Edwards as vice captain. A very impressive start. I'm so sorry. That's your favourite team name, isn't it, JC? Michael. He only got pipped by 3 points, 489 he finished with. White and Montrez as his forwards, and all of his bench scoring 25 plus. The easy winners, I think that's how I'm going to pronounce that. 485, Kendrick again as captain, an impressive shout out there. Hello Shazza for Bo, 480. He had Magnay as captain, which is, I think, he was one of the most traded in, I think, last week. So for Magnay to be captain there, that's why he scored well. And Brian Windhorst, I think, is the name. Some of these team names, honestly, I've stuck with Wally's Wizards. I think that's pretty simple. But some of these team names, Ryan had 479. Davis and Doyle as captain and vice captain.
Brian Windhorst is a noted NBA reporter, and so I don't know what Ryan is actually aiming at there, but it might actually just be Brian Windhorst. Because, you know what I love? NBL SuperCoach. I'm jumping on board. It's how I'm going to track my next stars. He's all over it, maybe. But yeah, Davis is the captain. Is like the sort of line of demarcation, I think, for this week. If you nailed that, you are laughing. I went with Trez. It wasn't quite as good. But I was just stoked to have Davis on my team anyway, and having ridden that sort of horse, I'm like happy I stuck with it. And yeah, so props to everybody who went and sort of rolled the dice a little bit on Davis as the captain.
Yeah, Magnay captain is that interesting one. Now 480 with Magnay captain was a pretty fantastic result, I guess. And
a reminder to everyone, you can go to the NBL app for stats, updates, all of the live SuperCoach scores, and supercoach.com.au. Geez, if I can get that out. For everything else that you need SuperCoach. That's my ride and die at the moment. I'm going there, looking at the latest updates, and also listening to the panel. So listen to me if you want some insights. We'll move on to our most traded in, most traded out. So most traded in, injury cloud around him coming into this round, potentially following this round as well. Taron Armstrong, 23% of people traded him in. He's still relatively cheap at $1.99 for his output. Xavier Cooks, MVP candidate for Sydney, 13.7% of people traded him in. Kendrick Davis, obviously. Trez Harrell, we've spoken about. And my personal favourite, he has been my pick at the start of the year, and I have gone for personality picks, but he's also just backing this up with his performances now, is Kalileo Pepe.
Nothing wrong with personality picks. I mentioned that quickly. I know you're the rookie. You're going with some personality picks. I like that because half of SuperCoach is watching your players play, and you want to, if you're picking guys that you like watching play, then I don't see any problem with that. All right.
Especially when they're making as much money as
especially when they're making money and they're doing cool things like that.
He's just out there scoring 1 million points in no minutes. Like that's exactly what you want from a SuperCoach sort of bench player at the moment. And that price point of 117, you can still probably get him in, Boydie, at this point if you're feeling, because he's going to keep on rising. And that's what a lot of this sort of comes down to, right? Like, who are still the cash cows you can jump on with this one? And Taron Armstrong is going to be the biggest question of this week, right? Like, it doesn't matter. Like, we've got the Cairns game on Thursday night. There is the injury cloud. So essentially to come down to, is he named? They do have the double this week. And we'll see what happens. Like, it's really, really tough to sort of like roll the dice, go, he's only on the 199. If he plays one game this week, that sort of screws this entire thing up. Yeah. He does have the double. It's a really, really tough one for me, and I'll get to that later when we talk about our trades, but Taron is probably a stay away for me at the moment.
Yeah, of course. So the injury cloud on there is that he rolled an ankle in the warm-up for the game on Sunday now, but he did play, and I think he played about 26 minutes in the end, but they did bring him off early, but then Melbourne went on a bit of a run, because Cairns were in front by a bit, but Melbourne were a bit on a run, and they brought him back in. So I think that's a bit of a red flag for me. And also he copped an elbow during the game as well, so there was some concussion issues possibly, but I think that's all clear. It's more the ankle or what have you that is a little bit of a worry there. But as you said, James, they play the first game of the round, so we'll know if he's in that starting lineup, he's playing. So if he's not in there, he's probably not playing. So we'll know straight away, and those people can reverse that trade pretty quickly and do something else. But I would have some contingency plans there. Cooks is the interesting one. Like, he's one of the biggest cash cow possibilities this week. If you've got SuperCoach Plus, you can select cash cows and have a look at the projected cash increases. I think Cooks is maybe one of the top 5 in that this week as well, and he's averaging like 41.
Exactly. So he has the double. He's got a break even of 60 for this week. So a projected price rise again of 27.6k, which is pretty crazy, and that's just like getting to your break even, off you go, making some money. He's already up 22.5k as well. So for a premium to sort of keep just doing this, like, this is absolute SuperCoach rolled gold at this point. So especially when you've got, as we get to the most traded out, like, you've got some of the other primos you want to maybe jump off on. Cooks is like the obvious sort of candidate of, like, he's playing MVP level basketball at this point. So.
And all of those players from that list, I'm taking a lot of notes. All of these players on this list are people that have 2 games coming up. And for me, I've made some errors last week. We had Melbourne, Perth and Tassie all playing 2 games, as well as Adelaide and Cairns. I jumped on all of the Melbourne, Perth and Tassie players, and I have hardly any Adelaide and Cairns. So we'll get to that a little bit later, but I think that's important to note that a lot of people are jumping on the 2 game players. And then the most traded out. So we've got Shea Ili for Melbourne, 10% of people have traded him out. He's at 24100. Will Magnay for Tassie, 9.6 people. He was the most traded in. Now they're getting rid of him. Jack White at 7.8%. He's at 315,800 for him. Bryce Cotton, a really big talking point here. He's one of the most traded out in the top 5. 6.8% of people are trading him out. He's on 407,300 at the moment. And Will Hickey, who we've spoken about, at 5.4% traded out. Boydie, talk to me about the Bryce Cotton thing. Is this wild?
It is a little bit wild. Obviously, Bryce is always well owned, but I think it's he's losing cash at the moment. He's only had a 50 odd in the last round over a double, so that an average of 25, which is much lower than his general SuperCoach average. So he might bleed cash for a couple of weeks. They've got a single this week as well, which doesn't help him. So, and obviously he's so expensive that you can do good things with that cash if you want to swap him around. So you can bring in Cooks this week pretty much for like cash wise, right? So people are doing that because you're going to get the double of Cooks rather than a single on Bryce. Now, can Bryce outscore anyone on a single almost? Yes. Even if they're on a double? Yes. But I think that's the key point there in their schedule. So
it's a tough one because you've also, like, I feel like the Bryce Cotton thing, it makes sense to jump off him now because he can keep dropping. He could lose like 40k. Like, let's go. Yep. Like, and then by the time he gets to around 7 or something, when we're getting back to some more Perth doubles, you go, hang on a second.
He's juicy.
Cheap, let's go.
Yeah.
Like, that's how you play SuperCoach, so it's absolute finest. you get off when they're at their sort of, before they start shedding too much money and you're costing yourself, jump off now. Basically trade in whoever you need to in your backcourt. I've got some ideas. And then you get this Bryce Cotton where it's a really, really sort of cheap primo, maybe 360K in 3 weeks' time, and you're laughing. So that's where I'm at with that. And Jalen Adams is another one, actually. Talk about shedding money. Like, he's got a massive break even this week, too.
Yeah, had a pair of 20s, so he's obviously dropped cash already and could drop cash again, but I mean, I'm not going to doubt him.
Yes, well, I want to get to those ideas, JC. We want to get to where we're sort of going with our trades in and out this week. What are we looking at and what we've got for us? For me, I want to ask about how I can really maximise those double rounds. I currently have no players from Adelaide, Cairns, and Sydney, and I really need to maximise those. How would you maximise those trades, and what do you think about getting those players in?
I think, Boydie, with all this sort of stuff, right, you're looking, not even just this week, where you go, we've got X teams on double games, but you have to take into account, I think the following week we've only got the Breakers and Tassie, and that's it. We've only got the 2 teams on the double. The week after, though, that's when I mentioned that we've got the Kings back on the double again and stuff like that. So you've got to look at this and go, right, what do the next 3 weeks look like for me? What does it look like for my team? How do I maximise getting the most amount of points in my starting lineup over those 3 rounds? And it is getting the teams like the Kings. I think the Taipans have another double in 2 weeks' time as well. So again, if they've got 5 games in 3 rounds, like that's your roll gold sort of stuff. Those are the players you want to have in there. And that's why the Taron Armstrong thing is so annoying, where you're like, oh, he'd be great to have in for 5 games. But so with Cairns, the Sixers and the Kings, like, that's fine. Adelaide, you've only got this 1 week, right? That's the sort of tricky part for them. So I set my team up last week to get as many Sixers in as I could, and I have probably too many Sixers, as it turns out. Matt Mahan, where are you? What are you doing?
He was great to begin with.
He was incredible the first couple of weeks. And he's like, oh, wait, James got me in his team now? I'm going to stink it up. Check this out. Watch out this. Oh, it's a brick 3. And I'm like, come on, man, you're breaking my heart. But outside of that, it's like you've got Breakers, Jackies. You want to look at those ahead. Because for me, everything is just geared towards getting PJC in 2 weeks' time. So
week's time, but yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, what about you looking ahead to round 4, Boydie?
Yeah, I mean, that's the key thing. You've got to look ahead. You can't just go for this round. As James sort of said, Adelaide have got to double this round, but then they go on this stinking run of singles, right? So you probably wouldn't be bringing any Adelaide guys in unless you've got the plans in place to get them out again next week. And I know PJC is going to be that. He's going to be the most traded in player next week. I think he's averaging about 50. So and hasn't had a price change yet. They've obviously only played the 2 games and come back from America and play the double, and they go on a run of doubles, right? I think it's 5 in a row. Yeah, something like that. 5 in 6 weeks or something like that. So you have to have plans in place. You're always got to be looking ahead because you've only got the 2 trades around unless you're using the important boosts. Now we've got 4 of those to use. You can only use 1, each round sort of thing. You can't use multiple boosts at once, but that allows you to trade in 3 players. Would you use that this week if you've got no Adelaide, no Sydney, and no Cairns? Maybe, maybe. But it depends for me if you've got. Well, you wouldn't have any New Zealand players in, but if you've got Tassie players in, for example, some coverage next week as well, then maybe you'd think about using a boost, but you want to keep them for emergencies as well. Although noting, I've already used 1 boost.
I've used 1 boost as well,
so
and I feel like it. But that's kind of it. So I'm looking at now for this week, because I did use the boost last week to get DJ and Trez in. I'll probably move on from DJ and probably from Trez next week. Yep. Free up that cash. But the captains for this week, I'll probably look at Trez again. Like he's basically like me, like knocking off 30s is like me knocking off the tops of 10s. Like I'm just like non-stop. He's just rocking out 30s left, right and centre. They've got a Sydney game that he had 33 against them in round 1 anyway. So if he can double up. But if you've got Xavier Cooks, you're just slapping the C on him again this week, right? Like away you go.
Yeah, I think Cooks is in form, averaging 40s, going nuts. I think you'd probably be picking him as a captain. The trades, there's multiple options, I guess. This week is really I'm on watch list because you've got the 2 Cairns guys. Obviously, Taron's the question mark as well, and also Groves is a question mark at Cairns. He missed that 2nd game last week too, with a calf strain. I think he didn't travel down to Melbourne for that 2nd game, and obviously we saw Kieran Galloway play big minutes and have a good score, and also AK Gack play bigger minutes and have a decent score as well for a couple of cheapy options. So my trades are sort of up in the air at the moment. It's kind of really going to depend on what happens in that first Thursday night game with Cairns versus Perth, because Perth had a couple of guys out as well. Exactly. So Pepper did well with Webster out and Windler out. does that happen again? And now Pinder's out. It's kind of just, there's so many things up in the air.
So many things up in the air. Lots for me to take away from this chat to inject into my own Supercoach teams. I want some final thoughts. Who is your captain this week?
Probably Trez or Davis. It'd be one of those two, I think.
JC?
It's probably Trez again.
Trez again. You love a bit of Trez.
I'm all over it.
For all of your Supercoach things, supercoach.com.au, you can use the NBL app for all of the live scores, updates, live Supercoach scores. I think that is my most used app on my phone, apart from maybe FaceTime. But thank you so much for you guys being here today. I have loved the insights. As a Supercoach rookie, I feel like I get the best taste of the experts and then also the people who are just here for the personality picks. Thanks so much for your time, guys, and thanks again for joining us.